Hello, everyone. I'm Liam QD Hall, and today, since I'm not sharing a homily for the Nativity this year, I would like to just go briefly over some of the Old English terms for Christmas. And there are a few, and we'll just go briefly over them. But first, I want to start with some history, actually. So, the first commemoration we have of Christ's birth on the 25th of December. I mean, you have some earlier stuff. Most of the earlier datings would put his birth in the springtime, which makes sense if you just know he's born around Passover. But we have this date as early as 336 in Rome. I feel like there's a good chance of it before that, but we have evidence of it at least being celebrated in 336 in Rome. This does kind of align with some other holidays going around, which are a little bit confusing. Maybe they're related in some ways. It depends on who you talk to, pretty much. But this was on the date of the winter solstice, actually, at the time, in the Julian calendar, I should note. But this date was likely not chosen for the solstice, and it was likely not chosen because of these other holidays. In the Julian calendar, the solstice moves because the Julian calendar has some problems with it, pretty much. So Bede actually preferred a date on the 21st for the solstice when he was writing in the 7th and 8th century when he lived. And then when England switched to the Gregorian calendar in 1752, the solstice was actually as early as the 11th. And today, I believe it was on the 8th, just a few days ago this year. So this was because there was no leap year that would be skipped in the Julian calendar, right? Essentially, you have a problem of a math fraction. This is because our ease of access, right? We put 365 in a normal year, 366 in every 4 years, right? Because supposedly there's 365.25. In reality, there's 365.24219 or something like that. And that the leap year, that math works effectively for the most part, but essentially you just need to actually skip leap years every once in a while. Essentially, the idea is so about after 400 years, you'd actually be a little over 3 days off. And after more than 400 years, they were considerably off, right? Hence why the Gregorian calendar was made. And now in the Gregorian calendar, besides making up for 10 days, when in England made up for 11 days because they switched later because they were Protestant when the Catholic Church did this change. And some places still follow Julian calendar, of course, which is why I mentioned the 8th. For this year, but it skips leap years. Right? It doesn't do one without fail. It actually skips a leap year every 100 years, pretty much, unless that year is divisible by 400. Right, so we didn't do it in 2000, but we did it in 1800. We did it in 1900. We're going to do it in 2100 again, where we normally have a leap year, we're not going to have a leap year. This is actually a picture down here from this calendar of Philicalis. Where we actually get, actually, part 12 is where the birth of Christ on the 25th is mentioned, right, in this chronography of 354. And it mentions here the 8 calends of January, birth of Christ in Bethlehem, Judea. The eight calends of January is the 25th of December. So, and he tops the list of this commemoration of the martyrs here in part 12. So anyways, but this picture is actually of December here in the calendar Philicalis. So anyways, we'll get in now the Anglo-Saxon Christmas, of course, regardless of when the solstice actually fell. In Anglo-Saxon England, people celebrate the solstice and Christmas on the 25th of December after conversion, of course. This date was likely chosen actually because it was 9 months after, again, in the Roman calendar, the spring equinox of March 25th, which may have already been the agreed upon date for the Annunciation. Seems likely. We also have the manuscript over here. So Christmas, the word Christmas. I want to look at that real quick. So the name of Christmas itself is actually a late attestation in the Old English corpus. It's from the early 11th century. I saw several dates online saying that 1038. I have no clue where they got that number. I had seen other sources point to Wulfstan here in actually his Be Christendoma. I'm again not 100% sure that actually was written by Wulfstan, it does seem more likely. And so if that was the case, 1038 is too late because Wulfstan was dead by then. But either way, it would still put it at the early 11th century. So it's safe to say the early 11th century that Christes Massa was said. And here's a sentence: Leocht Yeshut Elasta Man Bewita to Christus Massan Anto Kandor Massan Anto Estron. Which of course is a person should fulfill the light fee for payment at Christmas and at Candlemas and at Easter. And he goes on. And actually, Be Christendoma is really short. And not to be confused with, there's a couple other there's something Be Christendoma, and there's Be something Christendoma. This is just Be Christendoma, just the two words. And this is about Christianity, if you're curious. So here, though, in English, we have this mass ending, which actually a kind of a unique spin on the Latin, late Latin missa. The vulgar Latin would have been messa, which is probably where it came from. But it's not just mean the service of Mass itself, but the festival day in which Mass would be observed. Hence why you have things like Christmas and Candlemas. Also, of interesting note, Christmas itself, the word, retains that actually original vowel sound, Christ, as in, like Christa. Right, Christmas, Christus Massen still sounds the same as far as the Christ part is concerned. So that in itself is just an interesting, when you look at like the word like Christ, that is affected by a later vowel change, I would assume likely from that great vowel shift. And also, I would say that it is noteworthy that it is not a translation as well. So, I mean, again, it's its own kind of spin on Mass, but it's not a translation from the Latin word for Christmas, which is Nativitas Domini, right? The Nativity of the Lord, or it's not either from Adventus Domini. The season, Christmas can mean the season, right? Or the one day itself. And Adventus, it does get one thing we'll not talk about here, but the two coming, pretty much, of the Lord is the Advent. So, anyways, and then we have, again, from the benedictional of St. Athelwald, we have the Nativity over here. So I believe this is the baby Christ down here in a different perspective than Mary and Joseph. So anyways, the other word that you'll see, of course, when we talk about Christmas is Yule. So this is a name that predates the conversion, and it is Old English. This is a word that actually has some stuff we need to talk about as far as pronunciation is concerned. But Yale or Yule, maybe. This word has some problems. We're not actually sure how it was said. It could be any of those three ways. It could be all three of those ways. So you'll see some people who prefer the Yale. You'll see some people say that prefer the Yule. One of the reasons that has a problem actually is this EO in Old English. While there's some rules that are very strict rules, EO is not one of those strict rules in Old English, right? So you'll see some words that actually do follow an EO sound, like AO, but you'll see other ones that just are O, and the E is after that G to mark that it's palatalized. It's a ya sound rather than a ga, right? So this could be the E there is just Yule to make it, so we say palatalized, or it could be there because we need to say it. So Yule. Kind of hard to tell. And different people with different opinions out there. I prefer Yule in some sense, but Yale works as well. And I think that they both make sense. So again, it is where modern Yule comes from. It's likely, again, connected to the solstice. It was used as a name for Christmas, actually starting in the early Anglo-Saxon period after the conversion. And it was not a common name, though. In the north of England and Scotland, this would get heavily reinforced, become much more common in the vernacular with influx of Old Norse loanwords starting in the 9th century and onward, because Norse has a similarly named Yule, right? And so that would influence that, and it's kind of why we have this word still in English in some sense. So we do have some examples here, though, in Old English. So Feorwerti dacha ar Christa achenisa, that is ar Yeulum. So 40 days before Christ is born, that is before Yule. And this is from the Old English Martyrology. Sorry, I misspelled it there. But it's a 9th century Merson text. And then actually from the same text is Unurarius, that is un ura yetheoda se aftera yeola. So here you get the Yeola ending as well. And Bede mentions this in particular. It says January, that is our people's kind of after Yule. So you have the before Yule, our Yulum, and after the Yeola. So Yeolam here seems to be referring to Yule. Yeola, it definitely is referring to the month of Yule, right? So we had 2 months, pretty much generally believed the line of December and January, and that's what Bede says, which we have before Yule and after Yule, and so Yule would be smack here in the middle of this. So, anyways, that is Yule though. It's not a very common word. I mean, it is used throughout. You see it more later in Old English because of Old Norse influence. Anyways, up here we also have Lindisfarne Gospels, beginning of Luke chapter 2. That's in Latin, of course. Okay, and then the last but not least, our word midwinter. So we have actually the most prevalent name for Christmas, right? Yule, again, not very popular. Christmas, remember, is attested very late. Now, there is a chance Christmas shows up earlier and it just doesn't survive in our present corpus, right? There's always a chance of that, right? There's a lot of stuff we're missing from the medieval period, just from history in general. And there's a chance of that. But you would think that if it was the most popular name, that it would survive, because we do have a lot of attestations of Midwinter surviving. And we even have the one that's not even that popular, Yule, surviving as well from early attestations. So this is by far the most popular thing. If you want to say Merry Christmas, I would use Midwinter if you want to say it in Old English, and then there's lots of words you could use for Merry or whatever. But just heads up there. Christus Massa is a late one. So this actually again refers to the season, and specifically the 25th of December. So in Alfred's first series of homilies on the Annunciation, he says, "And hina bar oth midra wintris massa die," which means and bear him until midwinter's mass day. Actually, I have it right here. Until midwinter's mass day, oth midr wintris massa die, right here in the manuscript, which I put here from Bodley in the library. But also in the deep version of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, it is said in the year 1066, of course, something along these lines. And so we have another example though, and it is "Tha on midwinter's die hina harhoda to kinga Aldred, Archbishop on Westminster." Then on Midwinter's Day, he was hallowed, or consecrated, I guess, as king by Archbishop Aldred in Westminster. That is, of course, King William the Conqueror, which we know was crowned on Christmas Day. That's a rather famous happening. So, anyways, that's pretty much it. But like Yule, it was likely is a celebration that predates the conversion as well. That was adopted for these people's new religion, and I think it's important though that it was adopted by those people, right? In a sense, right, that they took it and they're like, we have a new identity. We have these words that work still. Let's use them. I do think Midwinter is interesting though, that where we have like the least common one in the Old English period is Christmas, pretty much, and then we have the most common is Midwinter, and Christmas is by far the most common in modern English, and Midwinter is probably the least common. I mean, like I can think of like In the Bleak Midwinter, that poem by Rossetti, but besides that, there's not really a lot of usage there. Maybe you could still get Midwinter's Day as a name for solstice, which does not fall on the 25th. It's not celebrated on the 25th in our current calendar anyways. So, but yeah, I do think that's interesting that where that has gone, or how times have changed. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this, learned some things about Christmas in the Old English language, and I appreciate you watching. I'll catch you next time.